Welcome to the secret live stream. I'm your host, Devin Madgy. I'm still here because I'm still alive. Sometimes life seems to be a problem. Sometimes life has a way of getting us involved in all of these strange ordeals, and then we suffer. This live stream is about suffering in the name of fun. There's a lot of pleasure seeking going on here. In fact, I would say it is the main reason why people suffer, because we're seeking some kind of reward that actually doesn't give us any feeling of reward. But before we talk about this, we have to allow ourselves to respect truth, because truth is necessarily the conduit for self-realization. If we don't respect the truth, if we would rather hide away from the truth of our being, the truth of our circumstances, the truth of our causes and the effects that are brought about from those causes, if we wish to hide ourselves with excuses, then we will never actually self-realize. Human beings play a lot of games with themselves. And all of us, including myself, have played many games with ourselves. A game of self-deception can allow us to ignore the fundamental realizations that can lead to a better existence. We're going to suffer, but are we going to increase the amount of suffering due to our own stupidity? Pleasure seeking is the main reason for illusion. I will explain to you why. When we seek sexual stimulation for the sake of sexual stimulation, when we seek mouth pleasure for the sake of mouth pleasure, when we seek inebriation for the sake of inebriation, we're telling the universe that we don't trust in our ability to be centered, to feel noble without this kind of entertainment. And I'm using the quotations gestures because what we oftentimes perceive as fun or entertainment actually leads to a lot of distress. Look around. All we have to do is be honest with ourselves. Look around, look at your own life. In the moments that ourselves and others choose to solely focus on their carnal desire, on the passions of the flesh, on the roller coaster rides that they think can be had free of charge, suffering is increased. Let's talk about sexual desire, because sexual desire is so twisted these days. It's become degenerated. And I will make the claim that millions upon millions, if not billions of people are prolonging their journey in Earth School because they're addicted to some stimulation here in the groin. When we long for something that we cannot attain ourselves, that requires, well, some kind of orgasm, some kind of hot sexual partner, we are distracting ourselves from the truth of what sex is. There are whole industries that are created around sexual desire. If it weren't for lust, so many people would have a completely different experience here. How many beings have destroyed their lives because they go after some kind of temporary sexual reward, and the outcome is, well, the creation of new beings. And if this has happened to you, well, it's okay. We make mistakes, and we should always vow to have an arc of redemption. But in order to redeem ourselves, especially in a world that is always trying to pull at us to ignore truth, ignore respect for ourselves and our soul journey, we have to grow resilient. How are we going to grow resilient against carnal desire? How are we going to grow resilient against addiction, fleshly passion? We become like beasts when we think we're just here to fulfill passions of the flesh. In fact, I think it's stupid. People even end up looking like beasts. They look freaky. They look like gremlins. They look like goblins. The story of Pinocchio includes a very important allegory within it. Pleasure Island is where a bunch of boys, including Pinocchio, go to have a ball. There's dispensers of cigars, if I remember correctly. There's all of these rides. I think there's booze, but there's definitely candy. The image of Pleasure Island is basically the image of hedonism. We can go after our hedonic uh, hunger. And what happens to the boys in Pinocchio? They become jackasses. They turn into donkeys. And in the Disney movie, Jiminy Cricket, who represents Pinocchio's conscience, says, "You jackasses, you're turning into jackasses," because we turn into jackasses when we emphasize mouth pleasure, groin pleasure. I want to drink. I want to get drunk. I want to do this. And nobody's really having a good time doing that. Everyone is chasing a phantom in their pursuit of their own carnal desire. We have to consistently remind ourselves that self-deception is the nature of humanity right now. It's so easy to slip away from a state of, I don't know, more control, more self-control, more self-respect. It's easy to slip away when we think that the grass is greener on the other side. One more drink, one more sexual partner, one more orgasm. what's the point in overstimulating ourselves when what comes up will always go back down? And then whatever we avoided in the pursuit of our fleshly passion, of our carnal desire, weighs heavier and heavier on our minds. Now, I am mostly concerned with the trajectory of the soul. The soul, baby. This isn't going to last forever. And obviously, if we can tap into our intuitions, we can verify for ourselves. Our actions have consequences, and not just in this lifetime, but also on our souls, on the quality of our souls, and therefore the quality of our existence here, now, and beyond. In the past, I've been accused of being boring or not being fun. But, how is suffering in the name of fun fun? Unless we truly value the truth, then none of these words will sound impressive. So, what we carry out throughout our lives absolutely has an imprint on our souls. Some people think this is a trap. This world is a trap. And yes, there are many trappings here. Are you going to trap yourself? That's the question I would rather you ask, other than why is this world so crazy? Are you going to suffer at your own hand when you could not? Or are you going to follow your fleshly passion and see where that takes you? It is my opinion. You're free to disagree with me. That addiction is the main reason humanity sucks. And yes, of course, we're all ultimately children of the divine. And a lot of times we don't know what we're doing. And that's the point. We don't know what we're doing much of the time. Grown up children is mostly uh, what we observe here. And that's okay. The soul necessarily, through its incarnations, needs to experience uh, lots of difficulties in order to learn about transcendence, how to transcend those difficulties. But if you're watching this live stream, you might be a soul who is now interested in transcending the self imposed difficulty. Baby, I'm in the same culture as you are. People are eating slop all over the place. I see the billboards, bars, and breweries, cocktail bars, liquor stores, pizza places, candy venues. I don't even know if that exists anymore, but you know what I mean. There is every opportunity for me to totally just become a beast, treat my body as a playground, and in my free time, what am I going to do? I don't know. I'm not going to pursue anything intelligent, I could say. I'm not going to try to develop any higher faculties, I could say. And maybe I should just, I don't know, scroll some kind of uh, app which promises me fun. It's so funny. All of the things uh, through our carnal desire that instills long-term suffering ultimately are short-lived in the pleasure department. How long does a sexual act take? Hmm, 8 minutes? 20, 40 at the most? And then how much effort do people put into acquiring some kind of fleeting satisfaction? A lot. A lot. What about food, huh? Obviously, we need food. Obviously, if you're trying to start a family, you know, I say you should respect what sex is, how it functions, and uh, I'm not intrinsically against having a pleasurable time. It's just right now, humanity is in a state of overemphasizing pleasure where there's actually more pain. To continue uh, my talk on the short lived effect of some carnal pleasure. I mean, how long does it take to eat a box of cupcakes? You can do that in 8 minutes if you want. So you get my point. When we treat ourselves like jackasses, when we treat ourselves as if there's no concern for ourselves and for our souls, then we are more likely to engage in things that are pleasurable in the moment, but in the long term create pain. And I do think this is one of the main reasons people self inflict suffering on themselves. It's in the name of the flesh. This is not my original idea, and there's no reason to try to take ownership of this idea. All of the, uh, well, good ancient texts talk about disconnecting from the body and the body's passions in order to connect with something higher. I don't like seeing humanity in a state where they're hiding from themselves. I don't want to see myself in a state where I'm hiding from myself. And there is nowhere to run, there is nowhere to hide. So where are we going to go? How about into the arms of truth? Why don't people run into the arms of truth? Why do so many cower away from the reality of their own relationship with themselves? I'm not talking about like the truth about God or the truth about uh, Rwanda or like any head facts. Why do people cower away from a true relationship with themselves that is not deceptive? It's because people don't want to deal with the storm that will confront them when finally they accept that the conscience and the inner voice has been screaming for a long time, creating a lot of the distress in our minds and most likely in the lives of whose minds are tormented in this way. I emphasize the relationship with ourselves because ultimately you are alone in the universe. That is not to say you don't have help. That's not to say your prayers will always go unanswered. And that is not to say that in times of need, a helping hand can't and won't be stretched out or you to someone in need. But I am saying your journey ultimately is your own. And this earth experience is meant to facilitate, well, I guess, whatever you want it to be. I would like this lifetime to be a lifetime jam packed of learning, of self discovery, and of knowing how creation works from the inside out. That's what I want to do. Now, obviously, much of humanity does not have this desire, and I don't care to change their ways. But I do see where we go wrong when we ignore this cruciality. We get lost, we become confused. And it's strange to say that we can get into a state where we don't even know ourselves. How can we not know ourselves? Of course I know myself. No, I'm not talking about your likes, I'm not talking about your dislikes, I'm not talking about the superficial things that can make up our interests or what we prefer to do in uh, our free time. I'm talking about knowing ourselves as an immovable force of creation that will never die. Only with this realization can we then accept that only the truth and nothing but the truth will ever evolve us. Well, what happens if we don't? What happens if we don't care and we just want to use this lifetime to uh, be a bit subpar? Well, you'll hold yourself accountable because you always do. There is no lying to the intuition, to the conscience, to the soul, and therefore to God. So self deception is just a game we play with ourselves as we're trying to build up the strength to finally accept the truth. And what is the truth? I mean, the truth can be, well, it's different in all of our circumstances. I know there are many beings on this live stream who have or are currently dealing with an addiction that is eating away at their experience, that is affecting their relationship with themselves and therefore with everyone else in their lives. It affects our minds, it affects our speech, it affects our dreams, it affects our appearance. So it's actually nothing to take lightly. If we don't accept the truth and where the truth can lead us, we're going to feel pathetic and we're going to know there's no way not to know what we truly feel, and no amount of distraction is going to take away that feeling deep down. Yes, we do live in a world where we can ignore everything, but that's not the world you have to live in, baby. Rise above the masses, we say. There's a lot of shit and it's going to roll over you, and you're going to become a part of it unless you choose consistently to be better than that, to, I don't know, like be cooler, to be a soul that actually gives a fuck. Y'all heard what I'm saying, dog? So let's break down the desires of the flesh because it's only a few things. I'll repeat myself. It's sexual desire, it's desire for a kind of indulgence, overindulgence, food, drink, drug. What else is there? I might be missing, I don't know, like addiction to. I mean, I'm sure there's people with addictions, like of amputating their limbs, but that's the exception, not the rule. And if you are someone who knows someone who's done that, you need to email me, and that's going to be quite the email exchange. So, sexual desire is something I've noticed people rationalize all the time in order to avoid the truth of the matter. I've had conversations with many people, and I've also had email exchanges where people contest my opinion on, you know, having more of a celibate mindset. One can say, well, sex is something we should not deprive ourselves of, and it's meant for the sacred communion between two people. And I say, yes, especially if you want to have babies. The funny thing is, when we think of sex, when most of us think of sex, we think of babies secondarily, and we think of pleasure first. And I've seen in many people's lives where this twisted paradigm leads to. It leads to single mothers, it leads to broken families, it leads to people actually having to take responsibility for a moment of lust. Nature works through us in sexual desire. It's nothing unique. It's nothing unique. It is a gift, yes, especially if we feel our purpose here is to reproduce, to have a family, and to be by their side. And there's nothing wrong with that. I will never poo poo that at all. If you've got a family and that's the decision you've made, you go, girl or uh, brother. Keep it going. There's nothing wrong with that. But if we are trying to make out sex to be not nature's call to connect and reproduce for the sake of propagating families, then we are just lying to ourselves. In the same light, when it comes to food, a lot of people view food as something that is mouth pleasure first and nutrition second. It's actually quite shocking to me how many people avoid this fact. But it's less and less surprising because the older I get, the more I realize we got a bunch of dumb fucks around. And I say this respectfully because I don't want people to be dumb fucks. I don't want myself to be a dumb fuck. And whenever I catch myself being a dumb fuck, I try to snap out of it because I want to be a bit better than that. And I want to know that uh, there is, like I said, an arc of redemption from our twisted ways, or if you want to use Christian terminology, our sinful nature. So we have to see things for what they are without putting a bunch of sparkles on them, especially when it comes to behaviors that can and absolutely do increase suffering in our lives and in everyone else's by default. I know we can say, there's nothing else in my life. I'm stressed, or maybe I work a lot, or I don't have a lot of friends, or there's uh, a feeling of hopelessness that uh, peeks in from time to time. And so, why don't I deserve a little bit of relief with a shot, with a beer, with some junk food, with, you know, a big pile of marijuana that I'm going to smoke? Or maybe it's Molly, or I don't know. You can fill in the blanks. I know that we give ourselves excuses because we are suffering. But are we going to suffer in the name of trying to appease our suffering? How about we dive into the actions that end up creating that suffering? Some could say, unfortunately, there's no going back. The clock keeps ticking, and every action we perform, everything we consume, every state of being we allow ourselves to exist in, every interaction we have with others, it accumulates into the being you are in the present moment always. And yes, this can be terrifying, but it's more terrifying when we refuse to snap out of it when we know we can. Muster up the strength to snap out of what we need to snap out of. Because the journey's only progressing. Mortality is an interesting topic. It's something that uh, a lot of us want to lie to ourselves about. It's a weird thing, being aware of your own mortality or finiteness in this experience. This obviously had a beginning and this is going to have an end, but it's not the end. What happens when we build anything? I don't know, a birdhouse, a song, a piece of art, when we're making food perhaps, and we're really not okay with the results. We want a do-over. Some have hypothesized that we are in a cycle of birth and death until we're done with these do-overs and we achieve what some would call moksha, or release from bondage, exit from the cycle of birth and death. It sounds attractive, doesn't it? I mean, I would imagine everyone hearing this would think, that sounds great. I would love to be unchained from earthly existence. I don't want to come back here. It would be nice to explore other realities, other territories, maybe even a paradise. But just like a recipe we mess up and then want to do over to prove to ourselves that, well, we actually can make some saag paneer for those who like Indian food. If we look back at our lives, at this performance, and we're not okay with that performance, or we don't find it very redemptive, or we don't even really respect the decisions we've made and how that translates into our soul quality, then we're absolutely going to come back. Then we're absolutely going to want to come back to prove it to ourselves. Unfortunately, religion and all of these ideologies which externalize the divine uh, have convinced us, many of us, that we have to appease some other force in order to get to some higher state or get to some paradise or go from human to demigod to God. But it doesn't work that way. And I can say that with complete assurance. It might feel as if God is holding us accountable if we believe in some external source that's hovering over us, but we all hold ourselves accountable each and every moment. We never get away with shit, dog. Know what I'm saying, dog? We don't. And we're not going to get away with it in this life, after this life, anywhere. And this tells me that straightening up and centering ourselves in the truth is the greatest pursuit we can undertake here. And everything else should be secondary. It all starts with you. We can blame the economy for our suffering or our bland or stale experiences. We can blame culture. We can point the finger all day long. This mass condition of pointing the finger at something which we don't even really have control over is a symptom of self-avoidance. Because if it's the world's problem, then well, that's it then. If only politics was like this, I wouldn't. Blah 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 blah. If only culture would stop being so that, then I'd have a chance to blah 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 blah. Does that sound reasonable? It doesn't sound reasonable to me because ultimately you and I are the common denominators in our experience. And last time I checked, you are viewing the world from the inside out, not from the outside in. If it was from the outside in, you'd be perceiving yourself like from behind you or from in front of you. And that, well, that's how a lot of video games work. But that's not how this video game works. So there is an all consuming tyranny in pleasure seeking. Pleasure seeking. But do we ever arrive at the perfect high? Do we ever arrive at the perfect orgasm? Do we ever arrive at, like, you know, even the perfectly decorated room? Do we ever really have enough money? For those who are interested in power, do we really ever have enough power? For those interested in fans and praise, is praise ever enough? So everything, even outside of following our carnal desire that instills more suffering in our lives than is necessary, all has to do with this idea that it's not enough. You know, I was having a conversation with a seeker the other day, and we were actually talking about sexual desire. And as many of you know, I have rung the bell of my celibacy for a while, ever since I made that commitment. And I was challenged. The seeker told me, I know your take on sex and how it affects us and how chasing it is kind of a double-edged sword, but it feels good. I mean, don't you want to feel good? And my response was, I don't care about that. My goal, and I haven't always achieved it, I'm still going just like the rest of you, is to be in the state, in the present moment where I'm not totally lusting after things, where I'm not a slave to my passions, my bodily passions. That doesn't feel good. But in the moment of our conversation, I said, you know, right now, there is nothing in me that feels unresolved as far as a craving. So, in order for me to value this sexual pleasure, which is so feel good, I would have to tell myself that there's a deficiency in the here and now, and only sexual pleasure can fulfill that void. If there is a void felt, I would rather not try to stitch it up with something out here. I mean a void in my being. If you're thirsty, drink some water, baby. I'm sure we have enough nuance in our reasoning capabilities to know exactly what we're talking about here. We can run away from this void. We can try to avoid the void, but the void is going to eat us. It will. If we don't solve it, it's going to eat us. It's going to just penetrate all of our experiences. Chaos will unfold if we avoid the truth. And if it doesn't eat us up from within, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. And this is not a threat. This is a law of the universe. It's cause and effect. It's what we don't resolve ends up trying to resolve itself outside as some kind of drama. And sometimes we do need a drama. Sometimes we do need heaviness. Sometimes chaos needs to unfold in order for us to finally arrive at the very, very, very important conclusion that maybe we just should be honest with ourselves and follow that honesty. So, thank you for joining us on the Secret live stream. Maybe we can say this to conclude. Addiction is something that we might be able to exchange. We can exchange our addiction for true self awareness. And I would even say, get addicted to self awareness. I'm totally addicted to climbing the ladder of my own incarnation. You might be able to find someone who you think is, I don't know, like more enlightened than me or talks better than me or makes better music than I. And I mean, maybe that's true, but we should never compare ourselves to anything else but the state of being that we've been intertwined in. So let's intertwine ourselves in something a bit more bulletproof, because what's going to make ourselves bulletproof, I can still speak English, is the truth. Love you all. Keep it going. Keep up the great work.